meeting to order. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Here.
Mrs. Wider,
Here.
Dr. Hawkins,
Here.
Mrs. Moore,
Here.
Mr. Simons.
Present.
At this time, we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we need approval of the agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Well, let me modify. The whole agenda we need approved.
Oh, let me amend my motion. I move to approve the agenda.
Okay.
Second.
And it has moved in second. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Wider,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes, said yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, motion passes. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the inspirational message from Woodlawn Elementary School. Mr. Burton?
Thank you. This is always just a highlight of all the board meetings, and there's a great video, and it's the ABCs of the 2020-2021 school year at Woodlawn Elementary School. It's 4 minutes of action-packed pictures and videos. You guys will love it. And without further ado, Mr. Lockhart.
Attendance, whether in person or through your computer screen, showing up to school every day will help you grow.
Be brave. Keep your brain strong by exercising every day. Whether you're reading a book or practicing your math facts, don't let your brain get lazy.
C, communication. Communicating with your teacher will help them better understand how to help you when you need it.
D, diversity. We embrace our differences at Princeton. All are welcome here.
Our teachers empower us every day for college, career, and life success.
F, journey. Being back to school means being back with our friends, even if we are 6 feet apart. G, going to the classroom. Our teachers are working hard to make sure learning through the computer is still fun.
H, health. I'm thankful for my health during this pandemic. I will not come to school if I don't feel well, because I would not want to put my friends and future at risk.
Internet. I use internet to stay connected with my teachers and classmates when I'm learning from home.
J, joy. I felt so much joy when I came back to school for the first time and got to see my teachers again. K, kindness. Always be kind to others. You never know what they might be going through.
We are learning every day, whether we are at home or at school.
Mask. You should always wear a mask to protect yourself and others.
New normal. We don't know how long this pandemic will last, but it is important to embrace it and go with the flow.
Organization. Being organized will help you be successful when learning at home or at school.
P, patient. Be patient with your teachers and principals. This is new for them too.
Q, questions. You might have a lot of questions about what is going on right now, and that's okay. Your teachers are here to help.
Our responsibility. You are responsible for your own learning. Always do your best and complete work you are proud of. As social distancing, always make sure to keep 6 feet between me and someone else to stay safe and healthy.
Talent. Did everyone else figure out a new talent during quarantine? Maybe you learned how to play an instrument.
You, uplift. It is important to uplift others during this time. Always be kind.
V. We are Vikings and we stick together.
W, welcome. Our teachers are always make us feel welcome. We might not always see it, but we know they are smiling at us behind their masks. Experiment. Our teachers have had to do some creative experimenting to figure out how to teach us safely during this crazy time.
Why you? 2020 sure has been a year I never forget.
Z, Zoom. It has become our new best friend.
Use it appropriately and stay connected.
You know, Woodlawn Elementary School and the other 7 elementary schools and the middle school, high school, and innovation center are so very special. But congratulations to Sherry Thompson and her wonderful staff for putting together another great presentation. It is a highlight of these board meetings. I'm sorry, Board of Education. I'm sorry. It is the highlight. We're here for kids, and that very much is why we're here. So they did a great job. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then the next piece, the recognitions or introductions. On video with us right now is the new director of a healthcare connection. Dolores Lindsay started this wonderful organization in her house and built it into not one, but a couple different health centers, really helping communities stay healthy, provide medical attention. And when she announced her retirement, I know everybody in this area was very concerned. They were looking forward to seeing who they were going to get. And tonight, without further ado, Ms. Joseph.
Yes, hello, good evening. I apologize. I think my video screen is frozen, so I do apologize. Zoom is wonderful when it works. I am
anymore.
So I am delighted to be in front of all of you this evening, and it has been an honor to step into this position and really been blessed to have the expertise of Mrs. Dolores Lindsay still working with me and alongside of me through this transition. And I am looking forward to continuing the relationship that we have with Princeton Viking School District. I think it's imperative. When the conversation began early on in 2011 and 2012, my understanding was this was really an uphill climb because school-based health centers was not the actual norm during that period of time. And today we know that school-based health centers really make an impact in the lives of the students that we serve, and even the faculty that we have the pleasure of working with. Early intervention, prevention, and wellness is critical to the success of them performing academically in the classroom. We know that keeping them in the classroom is imperative for their learning, and being available and accessible to them is really important so that we can not only work on their health, but also be an adjunct to their educational learning regarding health. So we want to be a partner with Princeton. We want to be there for the teachers, the faculty, of leading and organizing. And I am just really feeling very blessed to be a part of this project. And I look forward to the many opportunities that I do believe lie ahead of us and want to move forward on. So thank you again. And I look forward to one day meeting each of you personally, face to face again, as opposed to virtual.
Very, very pleased to meet you and very glad to know that the healthcare connection will continue. And we will
Yes.
continue to support you. Thank you.
Welcome
Thank
aboard.
you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Very
Thank you
happy
for
to be
joining
here.
us.
All right, thank you very much. We will continue with our agenda. Can I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It has been moved and second. Mrs. Petter, would you please call the roll?
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes?
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons, Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Whiter.
Yes.
Motion passes. District business, approval of October 2020 financial and investment report. I move to approve the October 2020 financial and investment report.
Second.
It has been moved and second. Ms. Petter?
Just a couple quick notes about October. On the first page of the report, I don't want the board to look shocked by the $1 million number in the gold box. Okay? Those are expenditures. We did plan for expenses to be a little up because of COVID. I think this has to do with timing, and that some of our COVID expenses are right now being covered by federal grant funds. So we will continue to watch this number as we move through this very interesting year. On the second page, we've received our final fall collection for the property taxes in October versus September in the previous years because of the county treasurer giving everybody a 1-month reprieve on that due date. November, we look forward to receiving our tangible personal property tax revenue. That's a nice little chunk of money. We receive that twice a year. So we look forward to that because in this last half of the first part of the fiscal year, the money doesn't come in like it used to in the spring when we were getting all those property taxes in. So this is the time where we're spending some of our savings down. And so we look forward to that money in November because December doesn't have much revenue at all. So expenses are on track. Those numbers are very good and no surprises there for expenses. Again, we do look forward to see what this very interesting year will bring us as it progresses.
Thank you. Are there any questions from anyone?
No.
Other comments?
No.
Ms. Petter, then, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons, Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Whiter,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yes. Motion passes. Next item, 5-year forecast.
I move to
To
approve.
approve the 5-year forecast as presented.
Okay, Mrs. Cleveland, will you second it with a little
Second.
delay? Okay, it has been moved and seconded. Mrs. Petter?
Okay, we had a very good review of the forecast last meeting, but I have some slides for you to review and the public to see. Thank you, Mr. Lockhart. You can go right to the next one. So this is the snapshot picture, which shows the current fiscal year we're in and the next 4 years, again, showing just where we're starting each year, the revenue we're projecting to come in, the expenses we're showing that we'll spend out this year. Then the next line is the either revenue surplus or deficit, and finally the cash balance at the end of each of those years. So of course, we do notice right off that we are in deficit spending. This was the year we had hoped to not be in deficit spending because of the passage of the levy. Unfortunately, we had a cut of state revenue of 1.4 million last year, and right now we expect another 1.4 million cut in state revenue this year. You can see how that definitely has impacted our plan when we were asking our taxpayers for additional funds. Unfortunate, but thank goodness we passed that levy, and we can't thank our taxpayers enough for that, especially now. So you'll see this trend of deficit spending. Again, we watch for the time where we hit about that 21 million marker. That is where we have to make decisions to maintain compliance with board policy of having enough cash to run the district. Next slide. This is just the picture. Oops. The last one was just the picture of that same image. That gold line is that cash balance issue that we want to watch. Next slide. Here's the graphic of the revenue. Again, I'm just going to keep it to 3 years out, 21, our current year, 22 and 23. There's just so much up in the air revenue-wise with our state funding that this will be something we have to watch. The rest of our revenue is, with the exception of the tangible personal property tax, fairly flat and easy to predict. The next chart is a new chart I decided to add so you can see the impact of decreasing in state funding and decreasing in the tangible personal property tax. That means that our local real estate, local property tax will have to take up more and more of our revenue responsibility. Next. We're going to go back one slide to the annual revenue, that one. Thank you. I do miss having control. The remote meetings did give me control. So these are the main areas of change that we should expect to see change in this year or in the out years, with the exception of property tax, which we've already had the change. So we'll remind everyone about that. In fiscal year 19, we passed the levy in November of 19, which is actually fiscal year 20. You'll see that slight bump there. That was the half of a collection of that property tax. In fiscal year 21, which is the current year we're in, we get the full collection of all those property taxes. So you can see that bump up. And then in 22 and 23, we remain at that virtually same collection with a small amount of growth. The next chart, general property tax takes up about 61% of our revenue. State revenue is a very different chart, much different than if you looked at the previous fiscal years, which had it trending fairly up and fairly flat. Fiscal year 20 was last year. That's where you see that drop, 1.4 million cut. 21, the same cut. We expect that to hold this year. We don't foresee any additional cuts, but again, we are at the mercy of the state. Our forecast is projecting a return to regular funding for state revenue. That means that we get back to where we were, plus the additional increases that we had been receiving because we are a capped district. State revenue is 6.5% of our budget, the funding formula. That's a little bit shocking, isn't it? Mm-hmm. So we will continue to project that we get a return on that state revenue. Everyone has to remember we have a new funding formula that's moving through legislation. We hold great hope for that. Princeton has been so heavily capped, which means the formula doesn't work for us at all. The state cannot afford to give us all the money we should be receiving, so we get a percentage increase under that cap. So it's been very, very modest. The next area is the property tax allocation. This is where that TPPT is. So I like everyone to be able to see how that is going to decrease. In this area is also homestead and rollback reimbursements. but TPPT is the majority of this category, and that reduction is about $950,000 per year. This is state law. They're phasing it out, and for years, Princeton fought the hard fight to try to keep that money. Next slide. Now on the expense side, you see the slight reduction last year, fiscal year 20, in expenses. There are two things, not just the pandemic, which saw some decreases in transportation, our substitutes, fuel, utilities, but we also received the Student Wellness and Success Funds. That allowed us to move some of our general fund expenses off to the Student Wellness and Success Fund. There was no rule against supplanting there, so those have moved out of the general fund into another fund. We received that money also again this year in fiscal 21, and we expect to receive it in the future. It is in state law. So we all know that can change, but right now we are forecasting that we will continue to receive that money, and those expenses will stay in that fund and outside of general fund. On the next chart, you can see how expenses make up our budget, and we are no different than every school district in the state. Somewhere between 70 and 80% lie all the expenses, which are salary and benefits. Ours might look a little low compared to some districts because we outsource our transportation, and that is a large chunk of salary and benefits for some districts. I want to point out too, the salaries possibly should not decrease like that you're seeing. We don't forecast any base increase in the forecast. So typically after negotiations, if there's a base increase, you'll see that number trend kind of up a little bit. Next slide. Then looking through each of the areas where the majority of the district expenses are. Fiscal years 19, 20, and 21 have base increases for all our salary schedules. And then in fiscal years 22 and 23, there's the step only. So it's a bit flatter. Benefits, there are several benefits that are dependent upon salary, retirement, Medicare, workers' comp are all percentages of salary amounts. Therefore, anytime we increase salary, we increase those three benefit areas. But the majority of that benefit expense is in retirement and in healthcare. Our healthcare is a flat 7.5% increase in this forecast. The last negotiations, we were able to cap that. Anytime our expense exceeds 7.5%, we have to go back and we have to find plan changes in order to get that to a 7.5%. Purchase services, you can see we had a dip in 19 to 20. Again, that's majority of student wellness and success, and some of the COVID expenses accounted for that. So then we show a general trend up in 21 as we do anticipate some COVID expenses coming in this category. Probably majority in the area of substitutes, and we'll just have to wait and see how that pans out. Next slide. We reviewed these items at the last meeting. I just wanted to make sure everybody had them in good print. Since there are quite a few assumptions built into this forecast, and it is just such an atmosphere of change that we'll have to monitor these and see how many we got right. So we are expecting student wellness and success funds to stay in our budget. If they don't, we will have to adjust. That means those expenses we moved out, we move back in. We are assuming that 1.4 million will be the only amount cut from our state funding this year. If there are additional funds cut, or if by chance we receive some of the funding back, we'll have to adjust that. Our fall collection for our property taxes was very good. I know we initially were concerned that some taxpayers might have difficulties paying taxes. Our taxpayers did a wonderful job. The Board of Revision cases were normal. We had success in most of them, so that did not impact our revenue. The medical insurance plan held good through another month. We do have a great number of high-cost claims right now. We are self-insured, so that does impact our bottom line directly. I have to believe that people being unable to receive services during certain parts of the pandemic did help the fund a little bit because those claims were down a bit, not a lot. So we, again, just continue to watch what happens with our medical insurance. On the next slide. The school year 2021. I think a lot of people in the school business did not think we would all still be in session. And isn't it awesome to learn that school is one of the safest places to be? I certainly can attest that our team here has worked nonstop to provide a safe environment for our students to learn in, and that we continue to hope that everybody comes to school the safest place to be. Federal grants have helped us take some of these costs off the general fund. I did have some communication with a finance person at OD through an email today. Right now, they don't expect any additional CARES dollars to come in the new year. I guess that remains to be seen since we'll have quite a big change at the federal level. We'll see what will happen. Certainly, we would benefit from anything that the federal government decided to send our way. Extracurriculars, I do believe, had a pretty good fall. We have to hope that we can have it as good of winter and spring. Revenue is down just because of the limitations on ticket sales, but we're still able to have our extracurriculars, and that we know is very good for our students also. And then again, we just continue to look at our operations and make sure we're spending our money in the best places we can. The last page is just the picture of where our state is, so people can attempt to understand that our state funding is relying on the state government. Has had a lot of impact to them, and those items are kind of just listed here. And just another plug that the Cupp-Patterson legislation for fair school funding has hit the Senate and the House, and everyone should be ready for a possible call to action, because the fact that Princeton is such a capped district, we have had increases in enrollment in many years. Our population has become more economically disadvantaged, and these are key things that drive funding. So because of the being capped formula, we haven't seen that money. The formula will benefit Princeton. So it is a good thing. It will benefit all districts around the state, and the fact that we can all talk about state funding and understand it, and our constituents can understand it, and we will know what we should be getting every year. And that will be a great benefit to all of us. That's all I have.
It's great. It's good to see the big picture and see where we are. Any questions from anyone about the 5-year forecast?
Yes. Going back to your comments regarding the levy and promises, if we look at fiscal year 21 and 22, am I right to assume that those deficit numbers are directly due to state cuts, the 1.3 and then the following year 2.7?
In the revenue side?
Is it revenue deficit or surplus? Page 2.
Definitely. That if we had not had 1.4 million cuts, we definitely would have been in the black at the end of this year. And that was our plan.
Right. And next year, this shows, you know, one of the things we talked about with the levy quite a bit was that we were going to, just because we got the money, we're going to be still very diligent with hiring practices, looking at evaluating programs, finding alternative revenue streams, which we've done consistently. So when you just look, just very easy math, if you take the 1.4 out of that first year, 2021, we're in the black. And then you have to take out another 1.4 from the next year, right, Chris? And then with the add, so we would.
Your first 1.4 was not on this page.
Yes, so we would
be. So you had more money here, at your beginning balance this year.
So 2
And you would
years,
have lost money.
we were projecting 2022 to be deficit spending under the old model, but we were doing such a great job with spending, we actually would have been in the black that year as well. And that was our promise to taxpayers. So it's a little bit, we understand that everybody has to do their part with COVID, right? I mean, it just makes sense. So we sucked it up. $1.4 million is a big number loss. Another 1.4, another big number loss. We did get some CARES dollars, and there are some other things happening, but this fair funding that Chris mentioned earlier is critical that it happens, because we know that education, public education, needs to be funded differently. I mean, and so 2 quick facts. Since either 2000 or 2005, I'm sorry, I heard both time frames, there have been 11,000 levies in the state of Ohio for tax purposes for schools, 11,000. The next highest state of our grade 50 states, the next highest state was Massachusetts with 5,000 levies. Something is drastically wrong. We're more than 2 times more prevalent of trying to pass levies in the state of Ohio. It's so broken, and something needs to happen. And we're fortunate to have some people that are really working very hard to try to get this done. But despite all the realities, we will continue to fight for doing what's right with our taxpayers' dollars to educate the students at the highest of all levels.
Any other questions? Okay, Mrs. Petter, we're ready for the vote.
Mr. Simons?
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland?
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder?
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Mrs. Moore?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes. Next item is approval of the resolution in observance of Inclusive Schools Week.
I move to approve
The observance of
resolution in
inclusive.
observance of Inclusive Schools Week, December 7th to 11th.
Second.
It has been moved and second.
There is a resolution that I would like to read, and this is each year, this is such a great week, but it's really, when you talk about inclusive schools, it's not just a week, it's each day in Princeton. But this is what the resolution says. Whereas the Inclusive Schools Network and schools around the world have designated the week of December 7th through the 11th, 2020 as Inclusive Schools Week. And whereas Princeton City School District is committed to providing an education in schools and classrooms that are welcoming and capable of educating all children. And whereas the educators of Princeton City School District recognize that each child is unique, learns differently, and therefore learns better if teaching is tailored to their abilities and interests. And whereas the educators and families of Princeton City School District have been working hard to ensure that our classrooms and schools are characterized as being high-performing and inclusive. And whereas by their efforts to make our schools and classrooms high-performing and inclusive, the educators and families of Princeton City School District have contributed significantly to building a stronger and more inclusive community. And whereas the educators and families of Princeton City School District deserve to celebrate their successes and wish to reflect on how they might even further improve. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that Princeton City School District joins with the Inclusive Schools Network, the Education Development Center, EDC, and schools, districts, and communities around the world in declaring the week of December 7th through 11th, 2020 as Inclusive Schools Week, and encourage schools and classrooms across the state of Ohio to sponsor appropriate learning and community building activities in its recognition. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to commend you. I think, Mr. Burton, you have an event set for November 19th where parents and community members can come and learn about inclusion and special education and different learning and teaching styles. Is that sort of what this is talking about as well?
Well, it just shows how committed we are to it. We're not waiting for the week, right? It's not just December 7th through 11th. It's what we do in practice each and every day.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that was a very good thing that you're offering on November 19th. I think it's at 6:30. Thank you. Online.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Yes, I have a comment. Going along with what Gina said, and the definition of inclusion is not just one segment or one part of the learning spectrum. It's each child. Is that correct, or am I reading
it
something
is.
that I shouldn't?
It is each and every.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yes, so we look at the complete gamut, and it's, this great representation of Princeton. So regardless of ability level, whether special needs or special needs, whether gifted or special needs, gender, we're welcoming everybody. Non-gender specific, we're gender specific, race, we welcome all, and that's what truly an inclusive school district is. It is all welcoming. I've said this before, it's the most welcoming of all churches.
Yes, it is. Any other comments? We're ready for the vote. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wider,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes,
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons.
Yes.
the motion passes. Thank you. Next is the approval of memorandum of understanding with TCP.
I move to approve the memo of understanding with TCP of Ohio as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any comments?
Yes, as it says in the second paragraph, there's not cost to the district for this service. And I think that's something that should be pointed out.
Yes, it's a good, so do you have any other additional comments about that? But
No, just that, one of the things that we do with all MOUs, with any type of partnership that we look at, is that we will, again, try to be great stewards of taxpayer dollars and look for these great collaborations with other outside entities.
thank you. Mrs. Petter, would you call the roll?
Mrs. Wider,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes,
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland.
Yes.
the motion passes. Next item, service agreement with Nearpod.
I move to approve the service agreement with Nearpod for school year 2020-2021 as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any comments or?
Just very quickly, this is a great resource for our staff to have, the students to be able to access. And again, in these trying of all times, when we look specifically at engaging students, we need to engage students across the gamut. And this is just one of the ways to do that.
Okay. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes,
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wider.
Yes.
motion passes. Next item, approval of job description of operations coordinator. I move to approve the job description of operations coordinator.
I second that.
Discussion, questions?
I would just say that, when we look at our job, each job description, we take it very seriously and look at the specific role of not only what existed with an old job description, but what the direction of the district is moving in. So when you look at the operations coordinator, we were very fortunate to be able to hire somebody that has a unique set of skills and a desire to learn in many different areas of operations. So when you think of operations, many times you think of buildings and grounds, food service, transportation. You think of security. There's lots of different operations in general. So having additional support in this area is critical, but I want to emphasize the very first part of the job description, which says, does develop and maintain an awareness of operations, safety, and security needs on all school properties through frequent inspection and consultation with principal, program, and building supervisors, teachers, staff, students, and parents. And so typically when you look at what the first part of any type of job description, not all the time, but typically when you look at that, you look at what we feel is most important, or at least as important as other things. So while we don't have a director of security like we used to before, security is paramount in everything that we do. And this position supports Mr. Fricky. It supports all of what we do. And quite frankly, the building principals are the ultimate overseers of the safety and security in their buildings. And they are the ones that supervise directly the security monitors and aides that we have and officers that we have, and in consultation with not only Mr. Fricky, but with the operations coordinator. So it's something that's still very, very important, obviously, when you look at this, but this job description really is the future of where we want to go with the position.
So we're kind of not really restructuring, but kind of renaming how we're operating with our safety and security.
Yeah, and instead of saying, hey, the only thing that they do is safety and security, which was never really the case, we put it into writing exactly what the truth was. So the truth was there was a multitude of topics in areas that were supported by this position. And now this is really, again, makes us stronger. It also puts things exactly the way that we intended it to be, which is the levels of support that's needed for operations across the board, because it's not as simple as just one or two little areas. There's inspections that have to happen. All the principals' licenses, you have to abide by what the state says from a safety and security perspective. You have to keep track of all the fire drills, all the tornado drills, all the safety evacuations, any type of training, and all that stuff. So it's a big position to have, and we need support across the board. But ultimately, in the schools, it's the principals that are in charge of safety and security, with the support of not only Mr. Fricky, but the operations coordinator.
Well, as one of the board members that's on the Safety and Security Committee, a lot of work has been done in terms of what individual buildings are doing, what principals are doing, drills. The work that we are doing for the safety and security of the district is very good. I mean, and it's very comprehensive and it's up to date. And we do have connections and partnerships with all the police departments that impact our district. So, I feel like we're doing a good job with that. And, the title itself, we did move away from head of security because, as you said, it does involve a lot of other things. Any other comments, questions? Mrs. Petter, call the roll.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Weider,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yes. Motion passes. Approval of job description of attendance paraprofessional.
I move to approve the job description of attendance paraprofessional as presented.
Second.
It's been moved in second. Comments, questions?
Just that, as we continue to work to engage students and all that, if you remember that we had 3 attendance or truancy officers, if you will, attendance officers. And during this time, we felt like it'd be better at this point to have somebody that would have the opportunity to engage a little bit more in school. A lot of times we will go out and we actually have to investigate, and that takes a lot of time. And so when the officers are out investigating, there's a lot of paperwork that still needs to be done. There's a lot of phone calls that still need to be made and so forth. And our attendance officers do a wonderful job, but this is going to really be beneficial for us. And also the position itself is bilingual, and we need to make sure that we have the ability to communicate effectively. So
Mrs. Cutter, please call the roll. Oh, I'm
Question.
sorry, comment?
Is this a transitional role from one to another, or is this additive?
There were, excuse me. There were 3 attendance officers. Now we have 2 attendance officers and a pair. So it's actually, it would be seen as a reduction, but we feel like it's going to be an increase because the ability that we're going to have to not only communicate, but also have somebody on premises all the time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Who's bilingual as well.
Mhm.
Okay. Mrs. Cutter?
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Motion passes. Approval of a resolution and master service agreement with Warren County ESC.
I move to approve the resolution and master service agreement with Warren County ESC for services for school year 2020, 2021 as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Comments? Question? Mrs. Petter, call the roll.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons.
Yes.
Motion passes. Approval of the agreement with Joining Forces for Children.
I move to approve the agreement with Joining Forces for Children as presented.
Second.
Comments or questions?
I would just like to say, excuse me, I would just like to say that, we spend a lot of time talking about the well-being of students, as we should. We also need to spend time recognizing the well-being of our staff who've worked so tirelessly during this pandemic, well, each year, but specifically during this pandemic. When you look across the board at the mental health of our students, there's a local school district that sent 1 student to the hospital for COVID-related issues, if you will, and they sent 15 to the hospital for mental health issues. We have as well, none with COVID that we know of, but certainly some from mental health perspective. We can't forget about the importance of taking care of our staff. So on November 23rd and November 24th, we've created space for staff to be able to get some additional support and some help. It will be cathartic, but it will also be led by Allison Savage, who is highly regarded, who has helped with our students before as well. And it's something that we feel very strongly about, and we will continue to do this periodically. And Chris Petter, in fact, the other day, when we were talking about this program and providing additional space for Dr. Phillips and Dr. Jameson and many others, Tanya West Wright and so forth, Chris instantly thought about a program that maybe we'll be able to bring in as well for some staff that may be in trauma, like right now. And where does the staff go? So we're looking at that program as well, which would be through Teledoc and would be a great program. And again, it is paramount that we take care of our staff. It is paramount that we take care of our students now and, forever. But ultimately, this is a great program, and thanks to Dr. Phillips for bringing this to us.
That's good.
Comments or questions?
I think that's fantastic. That's great.
Thank you.
The grant funds, are these federal grant funds?
They are federal. They're CARES dollars.
Okay.
Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland.
Yes.
Motion passes. Next item, approval of MOU with Princeton Association of Classroom Educators.
I move to approve the MOU with PACE for an English as a second language secondary department head as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and second. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder.
Yes.
The motion passes. Approval of contract rollover with PACE.
I move to approve the contract rollover with the Princeton Association of Classroom Educators case.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Any comment?
I would just like to say, if I may, very quickly, that, you know, we are absolutely blessed to have the relationship that we do with PACE and PSSA, both of them. When you look at some of these pandemics and what's happened during this time, you don't have to look very far to see teachers that have gone on strike. You've seen a lot of union leadership that have been very aggressive during this time. And our teachers continue to give and give and give. And they have great leadership with PACE. The teachers really truly get it. We have teachers give up time over and over again, and then really looking at this whole over the next 2 years, being able to roll a contract over. Everybody was fair, understanding. Everybody gave. I mean, it was really painless, and Dr. Jameson did a great job leading the charge with that, along with Chris Petter and the negotiations team. But certainly appreciate the great relationship with PACE. They're wonderful to work with, and they do a great job for the students of the district.
Absolutely, I would agree. I mean, it's all about the children and not individual needs, so that's very good. Any other comments? Mrs. Petter, call the roll.
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Wyder,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yeah. Motion passes. All right, next we move into our discussion items. Well, the first reading of the Princeton revision policies 6114, 6144, and 6325.
Yeah, and I don't know if there's.
Yeah, those policies contain financial
Investments
and things
and
that have,
then the federal funding.
as a result of COVID. So, yeah, so we've made adjustments in those. So first reading, and then next month we will vote on those. Academic update.
Well, I don't know if this would be the right time to bring this other piece up, but I feel like we have so much good news coming and a passionate plea that'll be coming up as well. So I don't want to lose sight of this.
Okay.
That when the pandemic first came to be, one of the biggest concerns was, how is the board, or how are boards across the state of Ohio going to operate if schools are closed? So there was the Attorney General provided some guidance, as well as some relief on how meetings can be held, so they could be held virtually, like we are right now. While we are in person, several of us, it's legal to have people vote outside of being in person. It expires December 1st. So as of December 1st, we can no longer have any virtual meetings unless something changes between now and then. Now, there is legislation and there's some guidance that they're working on right now to see that this may change. If it does not change, then the only people that could vote for any board item would be the ones that are in person. So our very first December board meeting, unless something changes, must be in person. And the only people that could vote, there will not be a virtual option. And that's just the way it is. Now, there is legislation, there is a lot of steam working that way, because they know that it's going to expire December 1st. Chris, is December 1st? So December 1st. So stay tuned for more information. It could happen any day. But just wanted to let everybody know that. And that may have some specific policy ramifications down the line.
Yeah.
And then for the academic update, just as a reminder, the very first meeting in December, we're going to unveil our strategic plan. There's been great work, great collaboration. And Dr. Phillips, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm going to anyway, because you can't wait to talk about what we did with the students. Do you mind coming up here and sharing what happened the last part of the strategic plan, myself and Dr. Phillips, Tanya West Wright, Tricia Roddy, there are many other people too had the opportunity to take part in this. It really made the strategic plan come alive. And Dr. Phillips, if you could share a few thoughts, thank you. Dr. Phillips, can you make sure your microphone's on?
I can hear it fine.
You can.
We can't.
There you
Wow,
go. Thank you.
got it. Yeah. I sent an email out to principals asking them to give me about 5 or 6 students, preferably leadership, with students who had leadership ability, who were perhaps part of student council or some other leadership in their schools. And as a result of that, we had 55 students. 44 of them were actually part of the interview. I had about 15 questions that were very student-oriented questions, but we actually ended up asking about 8 of them. But oh my God, the responses were fantastic. They shared lots of information about how they feel about Princeton, and talked a lot about their education, what they're learning in their classes, what are some of those things that we can do better. They talked about having more rigorous types of courses. I mean, I thought that was,
it was unbelievable.
It was,
they literally talked about opportunities,
right,
raising the rigor,
right,
the importance of diversity,
exactly,
inclusion. And we're not talking about just seniors.
Right.
We had elementary students that, I mean, it was incredible.
Oh yeah.
We had one elementary student that was talking about having higher level math classes.
Right. Exactly.
And being challenged that way as well.
Absolutely. Then in addition to that, they talked about the diversity that we have. They really liked the fact that we have diversity in our district. They talked about, one of the things they talked about was bullying, which was something that we've been talking about for quite a while. And of course, that part is in our health and safety strategies. And so Mr. Burton talked a lot about the strategic plan. He went over each one of those goals, each one of the strategies, asked them what it is that what do you think that means? And they gave responses. I mean, great responses. It was fantastic. We had 3 groups. We had middle school and high school. That was the first group. And then we had 4 elementaries. And then we had 4 elementaries. So we met with them in that manner. And it was very exciting, and it was a good experience for them. Mr. Burton said, now what you need to do is make sure that you put this in your portfolio. When it gets to that point where we're talking about what kinds of things you did in school, you make sure that you said that you were part of the strategic plan in your school district. So it was exciting. And we took all that information. I took the information and compiled it. And we'll be sharing it when we go over the strategic plan. But definitely it's part of, it's really helping us to inform the strategies and goals that we have in place.
Well, we are here for the students. That's why we do what we
Absolutely.
do. Mm-hmm. And so saving that to the last piece, really, before we do some boring statistic stuff, but it was it was amazing. So Dr. Phillips and all the principals, thanks for arranging that. That was the best part of our days.
It really was.
If you remember, Mary, those days were tough days.
We kind of went from the business partnership breakfast, which was fantastic because of the students led the discussion. And then we went to one of the interviews. And so it was fantastic. That was a whole student day.
Beautiful.
It was really great. And then the next day we talked with the elementary. So it was very enlightening, and hopefully it's going to inform us moving forward with the strategic plan.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips.
Thank you. That's great. All right.
Thank you.
Treasurer's report. You have more to say about money?
Man,
But wait, there's more.
I'm worn out.
Yeah.
I did want to update the board on the audit. The auditors were in the office week before last. They have reduced the number of days in office because of the pandemic. So they were only in the office 2 days. We've been working remotely with them ever since. A lot of scanning, a lot of emailing information, lots of email responses. But so far we're moving along quite well. If the board members have not responded to the email they received from the auditor about the annual form that you complete, please do so. If not, I'll bring copies Monday and people can sign there. But that's going well. I wanted to bring up the Board of Revisions, which I did mention in the report. Gary Stadronsky at Ennis Britton does that work for the district. Every BOR period, he sends me the final results, which are always very interesting. He reviews sales data, and he also responds to actual Board of Revisions filed in Hamilton County. And he has located the sales data and has found ways to track sales and find out when people move things a little differently. I don't really understand where he gets that data, but he reports out to me when he finds these. And I think it has to do with entrusting data and somehow, but it's very interesting. He sends a very detailed report, and we certainly do come out ahead on this because of course we are paying Gary to do this work. And I just wanted to report to the board that as of last week, he reported that he's saved us 1.1 million. And I promise you that's well under 10% of what we pay the entire Ennis Britton team to take care of the district entirely. So this is money well spent. Remember, over 60% of our revenue is from general property taxes. So tracking and making sure that we're getting this money for the district is important. We are not going after residents. These are business entities that are seeing growth in their valuation, and they sometimes want to argue about that growth, but we usually can come to a very fair agreement with everyone. So I think that's really important, the work that Gary does. And I think it's great that you guys can support him continuing that work, $1.1 million just this year. Right. One more plug for Fair School funding. Moving through the legislator, I think we will be having information for people to reach out to legislators for. I think you certainly will receive things from OSBA, but we'll try to be very direct and give you some language, some letters, some email responses that you can use, and it will be an immediate call to action. They do want to move on this. It's imperative that it passes before the end of the calendar year because of so many key legislators being term limited. So we have a lot of funds. This is the culmination of 3 years of work by superintendents, treasurers, food service directors, transportation directors, business operations people, special ed directors, people that understand what it costs to educate a student, as well as legislatures from both sides. So if we can't get this one through, I don't know what we do. It's been through a couple iterations. I think it's a good, solid formula. It's really getting very easy to understand. They have put it into modules so you can see what it costs for a student with special needs, a student with economic disadvantage. There's add-ons for those. All the deduction items are out of this formula. So we won't see a deduction for kids going to charter schools and non-public schools. We won't see that unfairness of Princeton receiving less than $1,000 for a student from the state But when one of those students leaves the district, we pay $7,000 or $6,000. We won't see that discrepancy because anytime you have that type of discrepancy, that money is coming from local tax dollars and leaving the district, since the state doesn't give us that much money. So Princeton people surely should be very supportive of this. More to come. I'm not sure. I haven't compared the 3 resolutions. I assume our professional organizations have all gotten together. I have a resolution that I'll bring to you guys on Monday, and that will ask for your support officially. And then we send that out to all the legislatures, and hopefully we continue to move forward on this. Okay. COVID costs were not in the financial report. I will have those also for you next meeting. We're having a lot of movement on the grant funds right now. So as 2 of the grants have to be spent out by the end of the fiscal year. So we're wrapping those up rapidly, and we'll have those numbers to you. Okay, that's it for me.
All right. So just a quick, well, since you're just talking about fair funding, let me hit that very quickly. So Chris is exactly right about the fair funding, making sure that we have a big push. Some of the issues that people have, and I think rightfully so, they're like, where's the money going to come from? But right now, currently, we have a funding formula that's unconstitutional. So it's been ruled 4 times unconstitutional, 11,000 levies, twice as much as any other state. It's so wrong. We know it's so wrong. We can't use that as an excuse. We need to get this in legislation, and then we can worry about the whole funding piece down the line, because I could assure you, nobody cared about the whole ed choice ramifications when that got thrown in. And then school districts like Princeton paying, $5,000 more to educate somebody from our taxpayers, to educate someone going to a parochial school or private, which again, I'm okay with school choice, but not on our dime. So with that being said, ed choice is rearing its ugly head. Tomorrow, Senator Huffman is going to talk about the new ed choice proposition. There's been many school districts that were in schools that were left off of the new list. All those schools look a lot like me in terms of skin color. It is not 100% that way, but I will tell you that when you look at the schools and school districts that got added, if you just look at the only school districts in Hamilton County that are on there, by and large, they all look the same. When you look at the Butler County in terms of social economic factor, they all look the same. It's hard to look at this any other way than what it is. And I was talking to a superintendent today that just was talking about this is segregation. And, those are some pretty harsh words, but, anybody out there listening right now, if you want to see the list, I'll show you the list and you prove to me that it's anything different than that. There's 429 schools now that would be on there. We would have one of our elementary schools drop off. We'd have 2 other schools jump on. And right now, the way that they have it structured, it would be yet again another hit to public education in general, and specifically Princeton. And so let me tell you that there'll be certain education, there'll be no educational requirements to qualify for this. So let's say you're a straight A student, taking care of all the great opportunities at Princeton that you could have. You're taking IB, you're taking AB, you're involved in activities that no other schools have. That child, even though they're getting all the benefit, having a great career, can leave Princeton and go to another school with private school on our dime. Now, even though they're saying that it won't cost us, like Chris said, with the fair funding, they're I believe, trying to get this in right now before fair funding so that they can, I think it's pillaging school districts. It really is. And we have great students here. We love them and we work very hard. When you look at the way that the ratings go, a student who is the lowest performing student can pull down 3 of top performing students down to a level where we may be seen as not high performing. That's just mathematics. That doesn't make any sense at all. And then when you look at somebody who may be the highest performing student leaving, taking a voucher, when the reason why they were created in the first place was for students that were struggling, students that had no chance. They looked at really, really big urban centers saying that some of the kids have no choice other than going to this school, which may or may not be failing in the eyes of the state. It is not a Princeton. We're not talking about Princeton failing kids. This system is failing kids. This system is wrong. Again, not all for school choice, but there's a way of doing it, and you have to do it the right way. And ultimately, there's going to be much more to come. I talked about this at the Leadership Academy today. When we call for a call to action on ed choice, people need to, our residents, everybody really need to stand up and say, enough's enough. You can't do it like this. And you're talking about poverty level of 400% above the poverty level to help people who allegedly can't help themselves, but yet the kids are already going to parochial schools in a lot of cases, and they literally will be taking more money. I have zero confidence that they're not going to somehow find some way to penalize our taxpayers. They've already done it with TPPT. They've done it with all this other deregulation, and now they're doing it again. And our taxpayers need to get upset with this, because the second we would go on the ballot, I know you'd be upset that we'd go on the ballot, but we're doing everything that we can financially to make all the right decisions, to create programs, to look at all the different alternative revenue streams. And we basically are being told that we're going to have to go to our public again down the line. And it is wrong. So much more information will be forthcoming. Look for some programming with myself, a couple other superintendents, and we're really going to push very hard with many conversations. But it's going to take our community to really step up on this issue and the fair funding.
Hey, Tom,
Yes.
did I read right? They're trying to push through school choice before Thanksgiving.
Yes.
Wow.
Not a lot of public comment time there.
Yep. It is, again, there's no other way of looking at this but the truth. This is a race issue. It is a social economic issue. There's no two ways about it. And if I name the schools in Hamilton County, again, it's crazy to me. And again, it sounds like, boy, I would hate school choice, but I don't. But there's a way of doing this. There's a way of doing this. If you're saying that kids have not achieved at Princeton, if you're saying that kids are low performing at Princeton, and those kids deserve a better shot, then take the low performing kids, if that's what you think, and then put them in what you think would be a better environment for them. Now, if you do that and you show that those kids are achieving at higher levels than what we ever could in public schools, I'll give it to you. But I tell you what, you're not going to allow those students that are low performing to get into some of the private and parochial schools through this program. They're not going to accept them. And that's not what the intent of this program was. The intent of the program was, I believe initially, I think it was well intended. We have to help those who can't help themselves. This is not what this has turned in. This is to help those schools that are going defunct, private and parochial schools. And this is very personal for several legislators, because the schools that they went to have had decreased enrollment because they have to, it costs a lot of money to educate. And so this is literally a way, and I'm not the only superintendent that feels this way, but literally a way to try to keep some schools solvent. And I'm not going to apologize for feeling that way. All right, let me take a deep breath. Talk about something positive.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Go ahead. Keep me fired up.
House Bill 6, which was the nuclear disaster,
Mhm.
literally, figuratively. The amount of money that is tied and rolled into that, how does that compare to the funding from Patterson that could pass?
Are you talking about like the $2 billion?
Yes.
Yeah, well, the pattern is not $2 billion. And so,
So the nuclear piece that had a lot of illegal situations revolving around it, more than enough to pay.
if you just look at the chicken or the egg theory in general, and I'm not trying to dismiss what you said there, but yeah, but you know, we'll see what works out with there. But if you look at just the sheer amount of money that's been given to the penal system instead of education in general, and when you look at that right there, if we just early intervention matters, developing kids with a work ethic, making sure they have pathways, all of that matters. And, you know, we're seeing that the more you do that early on, the less you need for social services, less you need for, again, we don't need to build more jails. We don't. And more prisons. We live in a great country. There's great programming going on. We need to spend more money early on. And with that being said, in perhaps the most awkward of all transitions, I did mention 2 awards earlier in previous board meetings, the Blue Chip Award and the Philo Award. Both these awards are about students of Princeton. Both of these are the great work that was done behind the scenes with 4 great students who ran cameras, who did production. They were about the principals and teachers and students that accomplished great things and community members that accomplished great things. We received these 2 awards from public television, Blue Chip Award and the Philo Award. And, you know, we get so motivated and we talk about doing more all the time. And there's a young lady who has accomplished great things here at Princeton, Ornella Siakam. And Ornella has received some big awards through performance poetry. She's led some of the work that we've done with creating student space. Just today, I talked to her about leading professional development across the country on social justice. Ornella, our 12th grader. And I'm proud to say that it's the 19th, Mrs. Roddy. The 19th, we'll be filming another episode of Viking Voices, The People of Princeton. And I'm proud to say that I will have a co-host who will certainly steal the show with Ornella Siakam. And so now until the end of the year, it's going to be Burton and Siakam. Siakam, Burton. It's going to be a great program, and Ornella is going to bring so much to it. And we're really excited that she's going to be involved as well. But this is why we're in the business, to create opportunities for students. And myself and associate principal of the high school, Mrs. Stollard, and Ornella's mom went to breakfast, and I talked about this opportunity. Ornella was darn near in tears. Mrs. Stollard was darn near in tears. Her mom was in tears, and it was great. And so that opportunity is wonderful. More great news. Chris Lockhart has spent every day trying to find more Chromebooks and really been on the hunt and trying to do things and pushing companies and so forth. And so November 23rd, we will have 500 new Chromebooks. It's going to take a little bit of time to get those up and running. But once we do, our middle school, you heard it here first right now, our middle school will be 1-to-1 before Christmas. So every single one of our middle school students.
Hey, I'm excited. Thank you.
Yeah. So we will have grades 6 through 12, all those 1-to-1. And then when we get the other ones in, who knows when that's going to be. But when we get the other ones in, there'll be another announcement. But we will continue to move forward. And Chris and your team, thank you very much for doing that. And then just very quickly with a COVID update, the last week has been pretty active, to say the least, around not only this region, but also the state of Ohio. Currently, we have 2 new student cases in-person learning, 2 new student cases at home learning, which means that it was first reported to us when they're at home. So again, if we didn't have this hybrid theory, all those students in school, it could lead to a lot more quarantining. 4 students that are completely remote that were reported to have COVID, 8 staff members. We currently have 52 in quarantine, and cumulatively throughout the very beginning of the school year, we've had 47 total cases of COVID. Wanted to make sure we let everybody know that, and I receive emails just about every day asking about if we're going to close, what's the process. Schools are still the safest place by far. We're taking part in a public evaluation. We know what that's going to prove. It's going to prove that there is no spread because we haven't seen it throughout. By and large, we haven't seen it. We heard one school that had spread. Again, it was all about not wearing masks and kids being very close to each other. But if you wear a mask, if you do the right thing, we're not seeing the spread. Our kids, and you heard me say it earlier, in local school district, 15 kids got referred to hospitals for suicide ideation, and 1 for COVID. It doesn't mean that it's not, that COVID is not real. It is real. It is terrible. And we need to continue to do our part and mask up and sanitize and do the right thing. But when you have 15 kids in a local school district, as well as even at Princeton, we've referred people to get some additional support. That is critical. It is all over the media. It's all over the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Boston Globe. You go on and on and on with research articles in the New England Journal of Medicine. And they're talking about the mental health of students and why it's so critical to be in school. Our kids will be in school, at least with this hybrid model, if not down the line, being able to bring more kids back until it is unsafe. And while we look at all these numbers here, and people could say, well, geez, we had 47 total cases. Well, again, I want you to think about the number of students that we have, the number of staff that we have here each and every day. So if we felt that it was not safe, trust me, we would not be in school. I do believe that there's going to be some big announcements coming out. Probably restaurants and bars and businesses may not be really happy, but there was more spread that they found in restaurants, in bars, than in school, than in churches, except for, ironically enough, the wedding situation, which is why the governor and Lance Himes, they just signed a new order, and you can only sit at a dinner table at a wedding, or wedding table, if you will, with family members. You cannot go to a bar. You have to be served. The food has to be served, and there's no dancing. That just came out today, and they're very serious about that. And so there's going to be a lot of people that will not necessarily be pleased probably this Thursday. Stay tuned for the governor's address, but we do appreciate all the great work that's been happening with Hamilton County, City of Springdale, and the Ohio Department of Health. And then lastly, yesterday I had an opportunity to present for the 3rd time at this National Superintendent's Forum on real world learning. And it was very well attended, which always shocks me that people actually will take their Sunday or Saturday or whatever and listen to me. But ultimately it's very well attended, and the evaluations came back through the roof. And the number one thing they said, the commitment to students, the commitment to staff, the commitment to pathways, and almost every single person that was in this session has already reached out for more information. So I really appreciate the board for allowing us to focus on real world education, for allowing the focus on the business partnerships, and really, because I know it's a lot, But that partnership just continues to pay off, and schools are trying to emulate that left and right. And they just don't know how it got done, but it got done because of commitment of the Board of Education, the commitment of our administrators, teachers, students, and entire educational community. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Okay, all right. Any questions or further
Yes,
comments?
I just wanted to say it's interesting that I believe Princeton is one of only 10 school districts in the state of Ohio taking part in a study. And for this part of the state, I think it's Princeton, Mason, and Lakota. Can you speak on that a little bit more, Mr. Burton, in terms of how that will benefit us?
Sure. So I think, unfortunately, one school dropped out. Tricia, is that true? So there's only 9 in the state of Ohio right now. What they're trying to see is the spread, if there's a difference between 3-foot separation and 6 foot. Do we see spread in schools? And so what they do is they test they test an experimental group and a control group. So if there's a student that has tested positive and you have many kids around that student within the 6-foot threshold, those students typically would have to be quarantined and go home. If they test negative, they do a rapid test. If they test negative, they could stay in school. And then they test a couple days later, and then they test as many as 4 times over the course of 2 weeks. Now, interestingly, if you do not quarantine, so you're negative and you stay in school, which is what they're saying can happen, because they're not seeing the spread when people leave. So that initial onset of someone who's positive, if there's 6 kids around them, that person who's positive, now they must go home. They're quarantined for 10 days. The other kids, if they test negative, can stay in school because they're negative. And what they're saying is that we're not going to see positives from that. That initial exposure is not going to lead to many positives, if any. And then what they do then is they take a look at another class and they test the same number of kids that they're testing in the other class to see if there's any cross-contamination, if you will. And so this test is really this evaluation is really going to, it'll be very interesting. Now, I did talk to one superintendent today who they did not have contact with the department who's doing this. We did. We have called parents to see if they wanted to participate. It is completely voluntary. And if they choose to do that, then there's a couple forms that they need to fill out. And then after that, all of the testing is arranged between the student and the entity who will be administering the tests. And I think today Fox 19 was the latest television station to interview and ask some questions, but we've received quite a bit of press on it, and it's really positive. And the biggest thing is this, so many times, I mean, you just heard me go off, if you will, about ed choice and fair funding. You just heard me say that, but I want to be part of the solution. We will be part of the solution at Princeton. We will advocate and do whatever we need to do. All this talk about COVID and whatever, and you guys heard me say this before, I feel like the schools are the safest place. And I worked really hard to get people to finally say that. Dr. Phillips got tired of me talking about it. Dr. Jameson, Mr. Fricky, Mrs. Roddy, Mr. Lockhart, probably everybody in the district, because I kept saying it over and over and over again. And finally, now all of a sudden, the governor's saying it, lieutenant governor, people are saying it. That's still not enough. We are going to be part of the proof. And if the proof is that there is spread, then I have no problem saying that, hey, now we know something we never knew before, and we'll make adjustments.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, by us taking part with those 9 other districts, does that give us any advantage for when the vaccination is released?
Well, it doesn't. I don't think it would. But
use your influence. I'm just kidding.
but I tell you something else though that we did get contacted on. Another evaluation is these key fobs that now they're developing to have kids wear, and then if there's a positive, then they just it's all programmed. Excuse me. It's all programmed. So if it's positive, it automatically says these 10 kids or 20 kids or whatever need to quarantine, or you need to test them because they're within 6 feet for 15 minutes over a 48-hour period of time. So it's really interesting technology. And I don't know if the vaccine's going to come out first, so it may make that moot point. But certainly we've received a lot of information and a lot of opportunities to take part in some of these studies.
It will be interesting to see. Yeah, we're looking forward to that. It's good press. Any other comments? Questions? One question about our next meeting will be November 23rd. There are some confusion or some people thinking that it would be the 30th. So I just want to clarify that at this time.
23rd.
The 23rd will be the next November meeting, which is the week of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, a week from today.
Week from today, next week.
Yep. And then earlier today, I just wanted to point this out. I put Dr. Phillips on the hot spot and called her up here before. But earlier today, or tonight, we approved Dr. Phillips. Thank you very much for the Board of Education, who's agreed to stay on one more year. So we certainly appreciate the great work that she's done. And Dr. Phillips, congratulations. Thank you for that. And then also under Dr. Phillips has a great team of people. And when you look at some of the work that the team has done, it's been pretty unbelievable. And probably the person with perhaps the most pressure on her this year is Tanya West-Wright. When you look at taking on all of curriculum, all of teaching and learning, K-12, and while Dr. Phillips gives great support, there's no question. But earlier today, as well as the board approved for Tanya West-Wright to be assistant superintendent, and another wonderful staff member, teammate, and just does wonderful things. So Tanya, I know you're listening. Congratulations to you as well. And that's all.
Okay. It's great stuff. And then the next meeting will be here or PAC? Next week?
PAC.
PAC, okay. Next meeting will be November 23rd at 6:30 at PAC. We are going to go into executive session at this time to discuss under section 12122G2 of the Ohio Revised Code some matters regarding finance and personnel. I move that we go into executive session at this time.
I'll second that.
It has been moved and seconded. Mrs. Petter, please call the roll.
Mr. Simons,
Yes.
Mrs. Cleveland,
Yes.
Mrs. Weider,
Yes.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes,
Mrs. Moore,
Yes.
and the motion passes. There will be no action taken when we return, but we will return to adjourn the meeting.
I just sent the information.
Okay. right, we are back from executive session. Can I have a motion to come out of executive session
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
It has been moved and second that we are out of executive session at 9:25 p.m. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion passes. And then at this time, we will need a motion to adjourn the meeting for the evening.
So moved. I make
moved.
a motion we adjourn.
Second.
Okay. So the meeting, we're out of the meeting at 9:26 p.m. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. The motion passes. Everyone, please have a good evening. We will see you.
Bye-bye.